Okay, welcome back. And I'm sorry that the last video ended so abruptly like it did. I was in the middle of talking about how I was just going to talk about Thomas Demand and then be done. And then, of course, it ended in mid-sentence. So there you go. Um, so um, this is just going to wrap up what we were talking about, some of these corrections that go with the previous set of lectures. And when we were last talking, we were talking about Per Manzoni and his relationship, like the kind of artwork dialogue relationship between him and Maurizio Catalan. And in the future, I might add them as a pair to the dialogue lecture because I think there is a real strong connection between their work. And so really we just have a couple more things to cover. I wanted to talk about Glenn Brown a little bit, make a correction about Thomas Demand. But first had something I wanted to say about Hiroshi Sugimoto. Number one, periodically I mispronounce Sugimoto as Sojitomo, and I apologize for that. I don't know why I do that, but it's Sojimoto. Number two, I think Sojimoto is probably one of the best artists to see these kind of three trends: romanticism, modernism, or maybe three aesthetics or three tendencies: romanticism, modernism, and postmodernism in one body of work. And if we look at his body of work, there's uh, obviously I've talked about how his perfectionism as a craftsman in photography, how he's so so devoted to getting the absolute richest, perfect, you know most dense image he can, is very much a very modernist value. The value of design and of craftsmanship and of kind of like a formal and material devotion to kind of like to perfecting your craft feels to me very modernist. And but also his interest in process, like this kind of process of like wherever he goes at any particular city, always taking an exact similar shot of the sea. The only thing changing is the sea, the sky, and the weather conditions, and taking them in this exact same way with a tripod, with the exact same camera. That is a very kind of very process type idea, and that feels very contemporary and even like and very postmodern. Him doing these kind of photographs of fictional images, photographs of these dioramas, but then photographing them in such a way that they feel as close to being non-fictional as possible. That also feels very postmodern. But then lastly, in a lot of his work, still there's this kind of sensibility. Probably you get that a little bit of this, but especially in the lightning piece, a very romantic sensibility. He loves drama, and not always, but in a lot of his work. So yes, I think you can see all three there. Okay, we're going to skip Damien Hirst. I spoke about them more than enough on the previous lecture. Same with Gary Hume. Once again, here's Matthew Barney. And I think when you see, like, the more work you see of his, the more you can see the Eva Hess and the Joseph Beuys connection, as well as the Bruce Nauman connection. And we're going to just fly through Terry Winters. I said a lot about Terry Winters, and yes, I do love Terry Winters. We're just going to fly through these guys. I didn't say enough about Cindy Sherman, but I'm not prepared to say much about her right now, except that I think she is a really important photographer and artist of the last 50 years. And we're going to get to Glenn Brown, I promise. But before we do, I just want to say about Andy Goldsworthy. Also, I think you can very much see kind of like those three tendencies all combining very clearly in his work. There is clearly a romantic kind of tendency, this idea of him all alone out in the landscape, kind of struggling with and against nature itself is very romantic. And then the images sometimes themselves feel very, very romantic, but they also, like these works could not be made by someone who didn't have a traditional design class. They very much feel like they are about, in many ways, very formalist design ideas. And then the idea that he makes artwork, a lot of his artwork, that only exists temporarily and is only documented, so that it's purely a process piece, a temporary installation, that, of course, feels very postmodern. So we can see all that. So Thomas Demand. Most important correction I need to make is the scale of these pieces. Sean had a conversation with me the other day, and he was mentioning that he did some research, and these are not done at a small scale like I originally thought. Yes, they are made mostly out of board and paper, but they are made, you know, life size or close to life size when he photographs them, and then he completely deconstructs them, and which I think is just amazing that he makes them at such a monumental scale. And also that many of these start by him finding original photography and then recreating the scene sculpturally and then rephotographing the sculptural piece of the scene. Also, I think is incredibly interesting. And so we're going to skip Cosimo von Bonnet, and I had just one more thing I wanted to say about Glenn Brown, which is that in the last lecture I didn't have the most recent work of Glenn Brown's, and I just wanted you to see these pieces because I think these recent works are really gorgeous and interesting, and they relate to the video. I think you watched the video of Glenn Brown at the Rembrandt Museum, and these strongly relate. In fact, actually, one of these is from that exhibition. And at the end here, I just had some other artists that I wanted to show you, and once again, the main thing I want you to get is this idea that it's not about any one artist defining what is postmodernism or defining what is contemporary art, but rather that it's about a number of different sensibilities combining. And that really understanding contemporary art is not an issue of like knowing theory or knowing a firm definition that can hold everything, but rather it's about just looking at the work and looking at a lot of work. And there's Albert Oehlen. I like it. I really love his work.